Hi, Christine again. I just thought I would talk about just something I've been kind of stewing on, a little bit of my path to Wicca thing again. Um, and it isn't so much the path to Wicca as more, if you see in some hangouts and, you know, follow any of my comments on YouTube or on Google Plus, now that they're separate again. You'll notice I'm kind of really, really harsh on some of the things that fundamental Christians, will come up with, and especially young Earth creationists and things like that. Fans of Ray Comfort and Ken Ham and, Kent Hovind and things. The more rabid individuals. The reason why I thought would be best explained if I get into how I got to where I'm at. Now, I have said before that, I was raised with kind of a mixture of beliefs, and a lot of it stemmed originally from German mysticism, because that's kind of the family tradition, the family thing. We're an old German family, and that's where a lot of witchcraft practices hid. The old pagan magic would kind of hide out inside Catholicism and stuff like that. Not a surprise to anybody, of course. But growing up, I think I had a very different concept of God. In part because I did not grow up in a church. I was never baptized. Still haven't been. No need to. Sorry. It was something that my family did not believe in. The reason why was because some of it was that the whole TV preacher thing really burned my family when a family member who was older and sick and stuff was donating money to one of these TV preachers, and nothing ever came of it. It was all empty promises. Still that way today, people. Don't give them your money. But anyway, so we just didn't get into that. And of course, family members said, the ones that were raising me had studied New Age stuff, had gone into studying Hinduism, Buddhism, different things, as much as it could study back then. Of course, there was a lot of traveling that they did and stuff before I came along. And so the New Age movement was really, really starting to take a hold. I still have books by Edgar Cayce and things like that. And I was grown up with the idea that what, people like Cayce and Eric von Daniken and some others were saying was pretty much something to think about, and the truth. I was brought up reading the Bible, and my family members are pretty devout, but they still don't go to church. Churches are the issue, not the religion. So, be watching things like Doctor Who and Star Trek and stuff and see, well, can you see where that story, the basis of that story is in the Bible and things like this? And, well, what could you make out of this? If you read this story in the Bible, what could you do with it as a writer, and so I was learned to be a little bit more critical, but yet the belief in Christ was very, very strong. Not the belief in Jesus, because anybody can be named Jesus. It's not appropriate to name anybody Christ, yet my name is Christine. Yeah. So, kind of a mixed bag there on things. And so when I did try to go to church, again, I kind of had a very childlike view of Christianity. To me, church was kind of a fun thing because the only exposure I did have was some Sunday school when I went to go and visit family and things like that. And, you know, when you're little, it kind of, and you get exposed to something the first time, it kind of colors your perception of it for quite a while. So when I was older, there still was that kind of that innocence regarding what Christians were like. Of course, the most exposure I still had was my family. And then when I was 18, I had met Malachi Martin, the author and Jesuit, and we became good friends. And so he colored my perception more on what Catholicism was. Now, he had told me in a letter not to become a nun. I had spent a lot of time wanting to be a nun, actually, despite my belief in fantasy and things like that. But he had advised against it. He said, there's no way I would be happy, and I would not find my purpose in this world doing this. So part of it was I was also an animist. I used to think that animals have their own perception of God, which is how it got me into writing different stories and fantasy things, and how I created some of the equine gods in my stories that eventually turned into the world dragons for the series that my fiance and I are currently working on. But these were things that I believed because, you know, you're looking at another social animal like a horse or something. They have specific behaviors where you can tell they communicate with each other and things like that. So I thought, well, what if, you know, if we were able to get into their heads, what is it that we would actually find? So those thoughts hit me at like 9 years old, 10, somewhere in there. So I had all these different things that kind of just melded into what I thought was a Christian belief because I had no concept of Christian belief. And it made no sense to me why kids at school, I had ones that try and set me on fire because I was a witch, even though I never said I was, but one day I wore a crucifix to school. Oh my God, no. Bad thing. And and living next to a cemetery didn't help either, you know. So it still didn't make any sense to me. And my first big time exposure to any sort of church was inside a Baptist church. And I was 10 years old, and I got invited to go with because one of my friends was a member there. And she's like, well, you can come with. My parents said it was okay. And I'm like, oh, okay, you know. Still having that idea of what church was supposed to be from when I was a lot younger. And my clouded, pleasant memories of it, which were some of my more pleasant memories from a childhood that was pretty rough. So I went, and the first thing that had happened, really, is they got up into their testimonials and then having people come up to, you know, talk about their sins and be born again and all of this stuff. And the family I was with kept nudging me to go. And when you're in this young and you're into this group that's so full of energy and so exciting, and people seem to be very accepting of you when you want to be accepted. This is huge. So I went up. And I guess I was supposedly born again. I was very, very religious in a lot of respects. Now I'd say more spiritual. But this just kind of sealed it for me. It's like, yay, where I wanted to be this whole time, you know? And I didn't think of the consequences of this. And there are consequences. There's emotional and mental consequences to doing this sort of thing when you are that young. Because really, what kind of sins did I do? I didn't have a concept really of sin other than not killing and not stealing. And when I did shoplift, I got caught. So my parents actually had me go to the jailhouse because the sheriff was a friend of theirs. And I spent the day there, and I returned everything that I took, and I never did it again. So, I didn't see that as a sin anymore because I had already taken measures to fix what I had done. Now, this doesn't mean asking for forgiveness or anything like this. This meant I went up and apologized. I returned everything. I saw what the consequences were if I did it later, on and on and on. So, different than what repentance is when you're inside one of these revivals or whatever the heck you want to call it. So I went up there and I repented for my sins. I don't even really know if I knew what said sins were or what they were. So I was born again, which now I look back and it's like, I probably was more Christian than those people were in the first place, because I lived it. I thought that I lived it. I strove to be a better person. And, but no, I had to go through the, all that, and they were going to start doing classes and back to Sunday school for me, so to speak. And I was really excited about this. Still having those perceptions colored from earlier years. Over the next couple weeks, my mother said, that's enough of that. Because I started getting very judgmental of everybody around me. And I started getting exceedingly critical. And everybody else was going to hell. And it changed the person I was. I became a person who didn't want to separate in a good way and didn't want to stand above in a good way. Everybody had to come and be what I was. And everybody had to come and convert or they were going to hell. And it just made me this negative, mean kid. The same type of kid who later on tried to set me on fire in a school hallway. This is what I had become. And my parents said, that's enough. Which I'm glad. I am very, very glad. I think it would have destroyed who I am. I had a lot of things that made growing up a struggle, made living a struggle. I mean, there were times I was suicidal. There was all sorts of things going on. But still, it would have changed who I am now in a very negative way. Because it was already working then. I was not happy. I actually am quite happy now. So later on, I still was a practicing Christian at home. I kind of learned to step back. And then when I was 16, 17, and 18, I had decided that I did want to become Catholic But I didn't have a concept again because I didn't go to church. There was no concept as to what I was and what these things were, because I had no exposure to them other than that one time and then the childhood thing. So this is where I learned the differences in the sects of Christianity that made absolutely no sense. I say sects because I still consider organized religion a form of cult. I'm sorry, I do. There are, I go to covens, I go to ritual and stuff, but I'm also a solitary practitioner now. I still do not like organized religion. If it's for teaching, if it's for being out helping the community, yeah. And if it's for helping people learn about each other and learn about their faith, and there's books and storehouses and sharing of experiences and that, yes. But the religion most of the time is about controlling somebody else. Not controlling yourself, not making yourself better. It's about putting your control and your beliefs and shoving them on other people. And they have to abide by it or they're not accepted. So, because of my ties with the Catholic Church by the time I was 18, I got to go and do communion in a Catholic church without having to go through the actual processes and without having to go through catechism and stuff because, well, Malachi spoke up for me a few times. Because he knew this is where I wanted to go, even though he advised don't go too far into it. But yeah, being Catholic at heart, he saw no problem with that. And I believed that. So I still didn't get the exposure. Not really. I saw the ritual and I saw the pomp and the circumstance and the worship of Mary and how important Mary was, the goddess. A retelling of the goddess tale. So the goddess was speaking to me at that point already. But I thought this was all beautiful, you know? I mean, everything about it was beautiful. And there'd been times I'd had dreams and visions of Christ and things like that, and of other gods, you know, but I didn't see them as Satan. I was taught what a demon looks like. I was taught what Satan was supposed to be, which had no image, by the way. Other gods were not Satan. They were just other deities. You just had to be careful who you talked to because sometimes you could run into some bad ones. It was no big deal. So I thought this whole thing, I thought Christianity in itself was a beautiful thing. It was a celebration of life and of redemption and getting out of the path of karma and rebirth over and over and over again, because back then my understanding of karma is different than what I know now or what I think now, because I don't ascribe to the whole that you can rebirth down into pretty much a semblance of hell. Sometimes if you're bad enough from lifetime to lifetime, I don't ascribe to that. I think there's other methods, but that's a different topic. But it was wonderful. And so when I went, the one day I couldn't make it, I mean, we'd have priests come out and visit and stuff like that. We had horses. We had everybody come out and visit. Well, then there was a Lutheran minister that came out to visit. And because he was talking to my dad. And of course we had Scientologists just show up. We had Jehovah's Witnesses show up. It was an all sorts of smattering of people when you have horse riding classes and things like that. And Saddle Club, you get a wide smattering of people. So, the Lutheran minister's like, well, we have service on Sunday, and this is the time you can come if you want. I'm like, oh, good. Hey, I want to go to church. I want to take communion. Okay, no problem. So I went. And I wanted to take communion. I was insulted when this little kid, after the minister had told me I could come and have communion that Sunday, and he happened to not be there, by the way, because I went there specifically to see him and to talk to him afterwards and let him know that I had come, and he wasn't there. But this 14-year-old kid was, who told me that I could not because I was not a member of the church. I was taught that an altar to God is an altar to God is an altar to God. It's the intent behind it. So here I go, and I'm allowed to take communion in one church, but not in another. And at this point, I had not fully understood or had taken into account my experience with the Baptists back in my earlier days. That they were part of the same religion. All these people are the same religion. And I'm like, what the heck? This makes no sense. I had a fight with this kid and I said, look, I just talked to and I said priest because I had no freaking clue. I said, I just talked to him 2 days ago and he said I could come and have communion. I get communion at this place all the time. He says, well, those are Catholics. I said, so what? Isn't it an altar to God here? So yeah, I got to come in and take communion after that little discussion, but I never went back. Because I'm like, this makes no sense. And it still does not make any sense. I'm sorry. You've got all your denominations. You guys got problems. I'm sorry. It makes no sense. By the thousands of denominations. I mean, really. So I waited a few years, and then when I got engaged to be married and was marrying a good Catholic boy. Now, mind you, I had a boyfriend who was Mormon, too, when I was 12. And he was the sweetest thing, but he eventually moved away, and I never saw him again. And we got along fantastic. So I thought, a boy from a very devout religion, not a problem. And so I had married a Catholic. And again, had my skewed idea of what religion is and everything, because I still had no concept. And they wanted us to go through all these classes to get married as Catholics. We ended up going to a Methodist church to get married eventually. And it still didn't make any sense. None of it made any sense. And of course, I still was doing all my practices at home, my scrying and protective spells and energy work and things like that. I still was doing all of this stuff all along. So that's where, being a witch came in, but this whole thing with the denominations is just, and it still to this day seems like the most insane thing to me. Because now that I'm outside of it, all I'm seeing is how one is fighting against the other, against the other, against the other. And maybe it's more pervasive on YouTube and Facebook and everything, but there was another time that I had an independent Baptist tell me that I had been tricked by Satan because I had a vision of Jesus on the cross where I was up alongside of him and he was talking to me. And I could smell the blood and smell the fear and the look in his eyes. I can't describe the look in his eyes and what those eyes looked like. Because I had that vision, that independent Baptist told me that that was Satan. And that I was satanic, even though I was Christian. So, yeah, this whole video is not about Wicca in general. This is more about my still not understanding the infighting that you guys do. And I am specifically targeting Christians today. You need to step back and think about what you're doing. In part, because, yeah, conversion that heavy, especially somebody that young, that is a form of brainwashing. And the only way to get somebody to completely agree with you and become the same as you has to involve brainwashing. And the funny thing is, you're all Christian. You all follow the same God. And yet more and more, especially, you know, when you're dealing with people like G-Man and Kent Hovind and Ken Ham and Ray Comfort, and they all are excessively judgmental, even about other Christians. Levi Price will sit there and hammer other Christians on a beach. What the hell? You guys don't even get what you're doing to each other. Step back and look at what your faith is supposed to be doing to yourself and for yourself. If you are out there trying to get other people to convert, are you really trying to do it for God, or are you trying to do it to make yourself feel good? And shouldn't your own faith be making you feel good? Your actions for yourself. Because if you are a peaceful person, if you are happy in your life, people are going to ask you what you're doing. They're going to ask. And then you answer. That's the appropriate time. Walk the walk, and people will notice. And they'll go, hey, what's going on there? I've had that response from rabbis who were like, they would just meet me somewhere randomly. We'd be passing on the street and they'd be looking, and some would stop and talk to me and actually say, what is it that you do? You have a glow around you. People notice these things. They don't have to be preached at. They don't have to be attacked. They don't have to be told that they're wrong all the time and that your version is correct, because you might be wrong. So that's pretty much about it. I'm sorry this video is so long, but I wanted to get these things out there. A lot of people seem to think that becoming a witch means that you're doing it because you're rebelling, or that you're being influenced by Satan. I have said this upcoming things several times. If you believe in Satan and you think Satan is driving people away, but you're being an obnoxious asshole about your religion, are you a tool for Satan? Because a lot of people leave a religion. Now, some find a different path and just go on their own and find something on their own and it fits them better. Okay, that's different. But if they specifically leave because of dogma and because of behaviors of people inside that religion, it might be because of the people inside that religion, not because of some outward entity. So think about your behavior. Think about why you do things. And then open a discourse with people. But you have to have an understanding of yourself first. So that's it today. I will talk to you guys later. Blessed be everybody.